So as I said, Fort Pitt Capital Group, you will see my name and Roman's name down there at the bottom. SEPA just stands for Certified Exit Planning Advisor. I work with businesses in particular, but we're both advisors. We have been here a good while. I've been here a very long while. And one of the areas of expertise that we like to bring to you is the opportunity to talk about things that can not only enrich your life, but help you to make the most of your assets. But first, we want to give you a little bit of information about Fort Pitt Capital Group.
Yeah, we could just share with you a little bit about who we are today as well. As Fort Pitt Capital Group, we're dedicated to delivering quality advice and ultimately helping clients navigate to their financial goals. We do so through a boutique feel with the resources of a large firm. And something we pride ourselves on is doing this with a holistic approach, a planning first approach, a client first approach, and ultimately helping clients with a concierge. We provide concierge service, custom solutions to complex problems, and do believe in, much like a tailored suit, that every client's needs are different from one another, and we're here to help you navigate to your best financial future. We'll move forward here with our webinars. Like we said, or as Chris said earlier, we're here as a resource. We're not just financial advisors. We're here as life advisors, as partners to help navigate your course and your individual course at that. We know complex issues can be hard to navigate, but we don't believe that complexity dictates complication, and are here to smooth out your ride and give the best advice we can through partnerships with lawyers and CPAs to provide the best expertise we can in given areas.
As I mentioned before, my name is Chris Cheney. I have been in this industry as a financial advisor for over 30 years, as well as 7 years in the nonprofit and development areas. So nonprofits and their missions are dear to my heart. As I also mentioned, I'm a certified exit planner, and that is designed to focus on helping business owners not only make the most of their business value, but to find the best and most optimal exit for them so that they can write the second chapter that they want. But the thing I love about Fort Pitt is that we really do put the client first. We are always dedicated to doing the right thing for the client. So that's part of what we're here to do today. One of the other things I love is that typically once we get to know a client, we serve them for years, and they long ago cease to be clients. They become friends, people we care tremendously about, we know a great deal about. And that just allows us to deliver a higher level of service. But Roman also brings a unique background. So, Roman?
Absolutely. I've been in the industry a little over 5 years now with a background on the institutional side, helping with asset allocation for funds and institutions. But I'm delighted to be with Fort Pitt Capital now as an advisor, helping clients and their families through different seasons of life. And as Chris alluded to there as well, it really is a partnership. We believe in helping clients and hopefully the future generations as well to steward and grow assets for goals and comfort and success for years to come. So we're excited today to talk with you and hope it is an interactive process. If you have any questions or would like to follow us along through our handouts, there's a way to do that as well. On a device, a mobile device, an iPad, an iPhone, Android, in the top right of your screen, you'll see what looks like a message box or an indicator there. If you click that, we're able to type in your messages and we will see those. Also, can follow along handouts there as well. On a desktop computer, it's a similar process. From the top right, you'll see a question. There'll be a dialog box. If you type in and then click send, sometimes the enter button doesn't always put the note through. But while we're here, I'd love to take a minute and look at the Fort Pitt way. This is something we believe in, we pride ourselves on, that we're a fiduciary. Put the clients first, we take initiative, we're solutions focused. So we are here to guide and help build a path for clients and be proactive in that path as well and navigate complexities, navigate issues, and look ahead, whether that's education, retirement planning. We're really here to be a resource. We follow through, we implement that plan in the best interest of the client, and ultimately we are in this together and hopefully for generations to come. Questions there?
Yep. So the focus today is about the value of charitable giving. And obviously your presence here indicates that this is something of interest to you. The wonderful thing about charitable giving is that you can do well by doing good. You obviously do good for your cause, but if you're smart about it, you can also do well for you. And that's our goal, is to help you make the most of all of your assets. So we do this in three basic different ways.
These three basic types of giving are: one, the direct immediate contributions. So as we'll talk here, and some of the nomenclature we'll use is that you have your contribution and your distribution. So in the direct immediate contributions, those happen at the same time. We can think of that as cash coming out of a wallet directly into a donation bin. You have direct deferred contributions, where the contribution and the distribution are separated by a period of time. Then we have structured gifts, which are a little more complex and nuanced. So first off, for the direct immediate contributions, we have cash. This is the one most folks, clients are most familiar with. This is the metaphoric offering basket. You take cash out from your savings or checking account, cash or card, and make an immediate contribution. So your organization of choice or charity has access to those funds. We also have qualified charitable distributions. You'll hear us reference those as QCDs. This is giving from your IRA. This can be advantageous from a tax point of view, and that not only can it satisfy part of your required minimum distribution, or at least lower your RMD, but if you're an individual who is taking Social Security, or will be soon, which hopefully we all will, it can also lower your IRMA, and we'll get into that here moving forward.
And a third way is with appreciated securities. So oftentimes, because our clients have been with us a long time, they might have an investment that has grown by 1,000, 2,000%. It happens, especially you make a great stock pick and it grows. So this is a great opportunity to meet a need. You can contribute the entirety of however much you want in stocks, avoid the capital gains on the sale of the stocks. You're not actually selling it, the charity is selling it, because they're tax exempt. They get the entire proceeds, which is wonderful, and you receive a tax deduction. Now, the key thing I just want to point out about this is, with a qualified charitable distribution, just like Roman mentioned, this counts against your RMD. It counts against your required minimum distribution. That typically is taxed to you at ordinary income tax rates. So that's oftentimes an immediate material benefit. And because your IRMA, that is your Medicare premium, is entirely based on your income, that helps to lower the taxable income. So the QCD does something wonderful. The appreciated charities, we just have to be a little more careful with. Why? Well, you've got a pretty sizable standard deduction, and that's that little note there. Be aware of your standard deduction. You may have to give substantial amounts of appreciated securities to meaningfully exceed that standard deduction. So when we talk about gifting appreciated securities, typically it's a meaningful amount, but we always want to make sure to work with a tax advisor to make sure that this is your best course of action. So this gives you a little more detail on the value of giving individual securities, stocks in particular, or anything that has a lot of appreciation. So in both cases, we take a look at the first column, option one. You, as the individual, sells the stock. In this case, we've got a $50,000 investment that has a $5,000 basis. What's a $5,000 basis? That's the amount of money you paid for the stock. So there's $45,000 worth of gain. If you sell the stock, you're going to owe long-term capital gains taxes of $6,750, which you can see right in the illustration. That leaves you with a gift after taxes of $43,250. You make that contribution, you do get a tax deduction. At a 24% tax deduction, it's a little over $10,000. But remember, you owed $6,750 in capital gains taxes. So your net tax benefit, your benefit from the contribution after paying your taxes, is just $3,630. Now compare that to giving the entire $50,000 to a charity or to a charitable vehicle. You don't pay any capital gains. The charity gets all $50,000. You get a sizable tax savings of $12,000, again, if you're at the 24% tax bracket. That's a difference of $8,370. That's a sizable difference. So typically we're talking about sizable contributions, gifts, but we also want to make sure we're smart about it. So if you have highly appreciated securities, that is something you should definitely look at. But a good tax advisor is going to help you negotiate which one makes the most sense. And we will coordinate that with you and your tax advisor.
And speaking of tax advisors and the potential for tax deductions for charitable donations, we do have to look at your deduction limits of adjusted gross income and make sure that your gifts qualify, as well as the amount that you give per year. So based on who you give to, what fund, what avenue you go, will determine what that amount could be. So for donor advised fund, for example, that's 60% of cash, 30% of appreciated assets. For private foundations, it's 30% of cash, 20% of appreciated assets. For public 501c3 registered charities, 60% of cash, 30% of appreciated assets. It's also important to note that if you were to give more within a given year, you're actually able to roll that over for years to come as well.
So you do get dollar for dollar on your tax deduction, but as Roman is pointing out, if you hit 60, for instance, with a donor advised fund or the public charity, if you contribute an amount that exceeds 60% of your adjusted gross income, you're going to have to carry that excess over into the next year. So the limit is solely on how much it represents of your adjusted gross income. That would be a sizable amount of gifting for most folks. So definitely something you always want to keep in mind.
Now to look at QCDs from your IRA, which we talked about earlier, it's often advantageous and a common route we see individuals take here. You're able to transfer funds directly from your IRA to a charity. As we talked about, this can count as an RMD, and actually lower the RMD you have to take for the year. There are no taxes to you. One thing we have to note is this has to come from an IRA. This cannot come directly from a 401k. So for most clients, that means we go from a 401k, 403b, 401a to an IRA, and would then be able to make a QCD. Maximum aggregate amount is $105,000 per individual per year. That's actually will be $108,000 in 2025. What's nice is that this number, the aggregate amount, is now indexed to inflation. So prior, and for the 20 years prior, it was fixed at $100,000 a year, but now we have the advantage of having that number fixed to inflation, which should mean it will grow over time.
And the nice thing is that as a result of a recent change in the law, this goes back to the Secure Act, actually the second version, there now is an option to elect a one-time QCD to what's called a split interest entity. So what is a split interest entity? Well, basically what it means is that there are two beneficiaries. The ultimate beneficiary will be the charity, but the interim beneficiary is you. So split interest. You get the income, as you can see here, it must pay a fixed percentage, minimum of 5% a year. And you're going to see some symbols there, CRUT, CRAT, or charitable gift annuity. All of these are vehicles whereby you put it into, and we'll discuss this in a little more detail later, you put it into these vehicles, you get 5% for the life of your life, or you and your spouse. You'll get income from that, and you get a deduction based on the total anticipated future value of the remainder. But you're only allowed to give up to $53,000 for this year. That also is indexed to inflation. It was $50,000 last year, but it's a once in a lifetime gift. So one and done. Now, the second type of giving is we call it direct deferred contributions. And again, we're saying, hey, we're going to give them directly, but we're not giving them to them now. So there are two different ways that typically you do this. One is through a long-term commitment. A lot of nonprofits, and back when I was involved in fundraising, this was a great way to give, and it's been something I've done for my life, is you can make a larger total gift by giving over regular periods. So for instance, if I give to charities, and I do, on a monthly basis, you can give a much more substantial gift over the course of the year or multiple years. When we would talk about major gifts, those are very sizable gifts that a nonprofit might look to receive from a donor. Oftentimes it is a long-term commitment. It might be 3, 4, or 5 years, and it's a significant commitment. So the charity will get the money. It will just be split over time. A bequest is frankly the most deferred. That's put in your will. So the idea here is to designate a charity as the beneficiary, or at least one of the beneficiaries of your will. They'll receive the money when you no longer need it. So there are two basic kinds of direct to the charity, but deferred gifts. Just so you know, unless you're giving it in this current year, you don't get a tax deduction in the current year. It's whenever the gift is actually made. The third type is a structured gift. And we came up with that term because that probably best describes, it's a very complex vehicle that has to be designed based on what you specifically want to accomplish. So here again, we're splitting the contribution, and Roman mentioned this earlier, from the distribution. The contribution is your part. I'm putting the money into this vehicle. The distribution is it comes out of the vehicle and goes to the charity at a different time. We can split them so that we can accomplish two very specific things. What we accomplish depends specifically on the nature of the type of structure. So go ahead. So we've got multiple types. You can establish an endowment that can be done through recurring gifts, just like we mentioned before, with this long-term commitment. Another is a donor advised fund. A donor advised fund is almost the equivalent, it's not identical, to an off-the-shelf charitable trust. It doesn't pay you back any money, but it's a great way, and we always work closely with tax advisors to bundle together multiple years. Remember what I mentioned earlier, your standard deduction is pretty high. So you've got to give a sizable amount for it to make sense to give in a given year from your taxable assets. Well, what we will often do is work with a tax advisor and the client to say, let's look at giving 3 to 5 years at one time so we get a meaningful tax deduction that year. We put it into a donor advised fund, and then the client or the investor can distribute that over time. How it's distributed is entirely up to them over time. It does have to go to a public 501c3 charity. But the nice idea is we can do tax planning around when the contribution is made, so you get that nice deduction, and then meet your charitable giving commitments over time, which is what you've committed to with these charities. So it kind of structures it differently. Now there's a third type here, totally different, charitable trust. A charitable trust, you're putting an asset into a trust. You specifically design how much income is going to be paid out, or at least what the criteria are, and where the remainder goes. So you're very specific about this. A charitable remainder trust allows the remainder, whatever remains at the end of the trust, to go to a charity. And the deduction you receive is based on the calculated future value that goes to the charity. But just like any other charitable vehicle, you can put an asset into it and don't worry about the capital gains. The charitable lead trust, a little different. You put the asset in, the income is paid out to the charity, and then typically the remainder goes to either you or to your heirs. But they're both designed very specifically. They're always tailored to your specific needs and goals within the limits that is permitted. The last one of a structured gift is foundations. So there are typically two types of foundations. Now, a foundation, most people know them. Think of the Pew Foundation, the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, MacArthur Foundation. These enormous foundations that have been able to carry on the legacy of the original donor, which is a great way to carry your legacy and your memory over across multiple generations. There are community foundations. We have a wonderful community foundation here in Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Foundation does a phenomenal job, which just basically provides a turnkey approach. You can make a commitment at a given time, and then that foundation account is paid out over time, basically as you direct. You can also, if the amount is sizable enough, set up a private foundation. A private foundation means that you're going to carry all of the responsibilities, but you've got a lot of flexibility that comes with it. Obviously, we're typically dealing with a higher dollar value. So those are the basic structured gifts. Because these are complicated, we're going to spend a little bit of time on them. It's important, you'll see that second note, you need to consult a tax and legal advisor. Need to, especially when it comes to designing a trust or a foundation. I'm going to be very direct. This is not the time to be cheap. This is the time to make sure that you get a seasoned, qualified, highly competent attorney and tax advisor, because it's going to make a material difference in the quality of what you've set up. So the first thing that I mentioned in that list, or the easiest one to access, and it's one that we do for clients all the time, is donor advised funds. Whether your assets are held at Fidelity or Schwab, wherever they may be held, typically we have the ability to set up a donor advised fund. It's a nice receptacle. These are public charities. They're set up as public charities. So you make a contribution, again, typically with highly appreciated stock. You can do cash. You can do all sorts of things. But you contribute to these. They're sort of turnkey. They're set up so that you can, with very little very little effort. Fund these, get a nice tax deduction, and then direct exactly where and when and how much goes out over time. There's no particular time limit, but you do obviously want to make sure that the proceeds are distributed to charities because that's the intent and the purpose. But the goal is eventually to make the distribution of the entire amount of the corpus, whatever you put into it. Now, you're allowed to contribute multiple times. It's not one and done. You can put in a certain amount one year and then a few years later add more when it makes sense from a tax perspective. But it's tremendously flexible. In fact, some of these services now have apps where you can go to an event. If you go to one of these fundraising events, you can actually go onto your app and make a deduction, a donation at that very moment right on the app. So it's a wonderful way to meet those charitable commitments. The second type are charitable trusts, and these, as I mentioned, are much more complex because you're designing the specific criteria and features. They do have to operate within certain limits, and you want to make sure they're properly devised and designed. That's the second type. And then the broad third type are the endowments. The endowments are a portion of, create a dedicated portfolio. It's going to be under the organization's, as you can see, direct oversight. Now, that could be an organization like the Pittsburgh Foundation, or if it's large enough, under your own direct organizational structure. And they're always designed to exist in perpetuity. The goal here is really to have a multi-generational resource that benefits not only the immediate, say, community, but future beneficiaries. So that's why you still have heard of the Rockefeller or Pew Foundations. These were set up decades ago and have just become massive in terms of their ability to support really important public works, public charities. So let's just focus a little bit on the donor advised fund. Roman, I'll let you take a look at that. Sure.
Absolutely. So a little more on the donor advised fund here, such as the Pittsburgh Foundation, allows us to separate what you give from, what you give from who you give it to. And you can see our donors here, even on this side, our big hearts, we want to give. We're going to give the donation, and that allows us to, over a number of years, we bundle multiple years of giving into one donation, and then over years, spread that out in disbursements, manage those investments, and itemize who your gifts are going to. An important note, we cannot give a QCD, as we mentioned earlier, to a donor advised fund, but on the contrary, you can make a charity with a donor advised fund, the recipient of a CRT. And this is that importance of working with a CPA and a tax professional to make sure you're within the bounds of where your giving is going and doing it within bounds of the law as well as the IRS. But a donor advised fund is something we work with often here and would obviously recommend for most clients.
Yeah, it's a tremendous vehicle to give. It's very accessible, very low cost. So it's a great way to achieve your charitable goals. So as Roman just mentioned, you can make a donor advised fund the recipient of a charitable trust. So if you design a charitable trust or charitable remainder trust, donor advised fund can actually be the recipient of the remainder. In a charitable lead trust, the donor advised fund can be the recipient of the income that's being paid out. So the issue is sort of who's the beneficiary or what type of beneficiary the charity is. So with a charitable remainder trust, we set up this trust, and because it's dedicated or all the assets will go to a charity, basically once you place stocks or investments into that charitable trust, they can be sold. As you can see in that first little cube up on the top left, we typically recommend highly appreciated assets because you get the most bang for the buck. Remember, when you're selling inside of a charitable trust, you're not paying any capital gains. That means, as the top right cube says, the assets are not eroded by capital gains taxation. All of your money is going to go to work. Typically, we do like to use this for concentrated positions. I'll give you an example. I was working with a gentleman who happened to have roughly $4 million in one asset that had an extremely low cost basis. What that meant was that about 98% of his money was taxable. Great investment, right? Wonderful. What do? We now have this highly concentrated position. So we took a portion of that and put it into a charitable trust. We can sell it all, diversify, and in this case, avoid buying any more of that particular stock because you don't want to just add to the problem, but diversify around that existing position. This gives him, in this case, and his wife, a much more diversified portfolio, but also income. Because of his age, you typically take between 5 to very high level amount of annual distribution, chose around 6% a year. That will last for his life and his wife's entire life. Now, one of the key things, and this is really important, is when the last person deceases, that money goes to a charity. So we made it very clear repeatedly, it will not go to your children. It cannot. That's what makes it a charitable trust. These assets ultimately go to a charity. But once you put those assets in, you sell it, you can completely reposition it as needed, and then make payouts based on, in this case, 6% a year that has to be recalculated every year. So obviously, they got a tremendous benefit from it. We'll just touch on that in a little more detail here in a second. But they avoided all of those capital gains, and they got a sizable tax deduction based on the anticipated future value of the remaining asset, and it was very sizable. So that helped in the current year.
And to recap, the short and sweet, I suppose, of the charitable remainder trust is that you take your assets, avoid the paying capital gain, get the tax deduction, move your assets into a CRT, and then you and your loved ones become the beneficiary of that income stream. With the idea being that once either you pass, your spouse, whoever the last surviving beneficiary is of the CRT, once they pass, the remaining assets then go to a charity. So you're able to do good as well as provide an income stream for you and your loved ones while you're still here.
So here's kind of how that looks. This should be the last little bit that we spent on it. The next slide. There we go. You make the contribution. That's that circle 1. That's the first step. Actually, the first step is designing the charitable trust. We don't make the contribution until everything's been designed. It's airtight and squeaky clean. And then we make the contribution. Once it's made, it's irrevocable. That is money that is committed. We reposition all those assets. We don't pay any capital gains. But then on an annual basis, money is paid back to the income beneficiaries, typically you and the spouse. That's typically the case. It can also be set up for a term of years, say 20 years. And then as soon as it stops, the remainder, that's the third part, goes to the charity or charities of your choice. One other thing I will mention is that you can always change the charities. So once you've written it into the will, it doesn't mean that you're stuck with them. You can change them later. But the one thing that is critical is they have to go to 501c3 public charities. That's the critical part. The other nice thing about the income stream, that's the second circle, is that it will be comprised of typically interest income, that is taxable as ordinary income, but it also might consist of capital gains that are taxed at a lower income, and on a rare occasion, principal as well. So it can actually have a potentially beneficial, from a tax standpoint, character in terms of that income. That's a charitable remainder trust. Charitable lead trust is a completely different thing. Here, the charity is the lead recipient. That is to say, the charity is the recipient of the income. You fund it with an appreciated asset. The income is paid out to the charity of your choice. You receive a sizable, based on the future value of that payout stream, deduction right now, and the asset can pass back to you or your heirs, often at a discount, and that can make an invaluable estate planning tool. So that's the nature of a charitable lead trust. There we go. This is kind of how it works. Another visual. If you take a look here, you can see step 1, you've got the donor down in the lower left hand of your screen. That puts the money into the charitable lead trust. The charitable lead trust then makes these annual payments to the charity for a fixed term, in which case, again, that charitable deduction is based on the anticipated future value of those payouts. And then the remainder, which is the asset, then gets passed actually back to you or to a beneficiary of your choice. It's a great estate planning tool. That's its primary value.
Yeah, both CRTs and structures here can be complex tools and vehicles to make charitable gifts here. They're often vehicles that we work with as well, but we just want to emphasize that it is important to work with a qualified and trusted attorney to make sure that this is set up in line with your goals as well as to protect your assets more broadly. That's part of the partnership we provide here, is working with CPAs as well as attorneys that are partnered with Fort Pitt Capital to make sure that you have a cohesive, comprehensive plan. So no part of the plan goes without professional insight.
And actually, to Roman's point, a lot of people may know an attorney, And a lot of your local attorneys do a great job handling the day-to-day legal issues that you face. But they don't have a lot of experience designing charitable trusts. Here we need a really seasoned estate and trust attorney. A lot of folks don't know that, who might be a good one. Fortunately, we work with a lot of the most reputable state and trust attorneys in the Pittsburgh area, not only Pittsburgh, but across the country. And that allows us to make recommendations as to who you might want to work with. Also with tax advisors, people who are very savvy when it comes to understanding how these need to work, the recurring calculations, the reporting that's part of the process. Obviously, you can tell that it's not just the attorney, but then an ongoing relationship with the accountant, because this has to be filed every year. So these things are complex. They need to be done well. They need to be done correctly, and we're here to help coordinate that process just to make it easier for you. Our goal is to do the heavy lifting where possible, so that you don't have to. So foundations, these are the sort of the bigger charitable gifts. You've got multiple types of foundations. Now, a foundation is a tax exempt organization that's designed to live in perpetuity. They've got a variety of particular potential recipients that they can give to. But again, the key is to remain a stable, perpetual source of funding and support. Who the recipient of the support is may change over time, likely will change over time. But foundations can become a wonderful legacy for those who have built up a sizable portfolio. They basically come in two different kinds. So the first type of foundation is called a community foundation. So the great thing about a community foundation is that they basically provide turnkey. You don't have to reproduce the wheel. They do all the administration. They help with the management of the endowment, the record keeping, as you can see, research. Why research? Well, you may have said, hey, I want it to go to these specific types of charities. Charities change over time. So you may see a charity that at one point met your needs or your goals, and its mission may evolve over time. Or you may say, hey, I've now seen some other charities that are even more aligned with my goals, and their job is to actually go out and research the ones that do the best job of meeting the objectives that you have for your charitable giving. And then they make sure annual distributions are being met. Their job is to ensure that everything is complied with, so that you realize the purposes for which you've established your account at the community foundation. And again, the Pittsburgh Foundation just does a wonderful job. This is really valuable, especially if they're going to be gifts that are established to give out not only over your lifetime, but multiple lifetimes. That becomes important. One of the things I love about a foundation, whether it's the community foundation or it is your own personal foundation that you set up, and we'll talk briefly about here in a minute, is that this is a great way to get children and grandchildren involved in your values. Think about the Kennedys. You can think about multiple people, families where, they might have a tremendous amount of privilege, but because they're involved in the family charities, they see the very issues and concerns that were so important to the first generation in establishing that. It helps to pass along the values and priorities that are important to you, and it can support that family legacy. It's really helpful. And in my experience, especially having worked in trust departments, it's a great way to ensure that you pass along those values that are so important to you. Having wealth can be a tremendous benefit, but it can also open up opportunities that after a while you may not see the privilege of it just as well. Working oftentimes with these charitable recipients helps to maintain that tremendous sense of gratitude and even obligation to other folks. Helps to maintain those values. So it's a great way to do it. And again, I would urge you, reach out to the Pittsburgh Foundation. They do a wonderful job. We're very involved with them. They're unique. They're not the only ones. There are other communities around here that have great community foundations as well. A lot of the counties do. We're always happy to work with you if you want to establish yours in your particular county. Now, that's the turnkey version, the ones that are already preset. You basically work with them, you pay an administrative cost, and it's kind of just an ongoing thing. The second kind is a private foundation. So typically, with a private foundation, we work with them when we're talking about a sizable amount of money. Maybe it's 5 million or 10 million or 20 million, but now we're at the point where you can actually afford, it's cost effective to have your own attorneys and accountants handling the administration and the reporting. The research, however, falls back on you. but you can contribute lots of different types of assets to this. And it may exist, the goal is that it will exist in perpetuity, but it may have some very specific objectives. But you've got a lot of latitude in terms of who those recipients are. There we go. You can actually give grants to actual individuals who meet specific criteria. You can set up criteria that will allow you to support individuals. You can set up scholarship programs, as you can see, specific program-related distributions. There's some flexibility of private foundations that you may not get with a community foundation. I actually happen to have the privilege of sitting on the board of a private foundation, and we have been able to make an almost miraculous change in the community that this particular foundation is focused on, really meeting a tremendous and urgent need. And that's the other thing. I'll go back to my point about community foundations and private foundations. Is once if your children or grandchildren happen to have the privilege of sitting on these boards, they will see needs that oftentimes are so far below the radar, you're just not aware. If we live in a nice community, we might be somewhat inured or be unaware of the level of need. But through this private foundation that I happen to sit on the board of, we just see tremendous changes occurring, and the need. I was not aware of the depth of the need, so it's been eye-opening. It's a wonderful legacy that you can give to your family. So to kind of sum up, charitable giving can accomplish a great deal. Now, we've talked about a number of different avenues, a number of different things that could be accomplished. Obviously, one key reason that you give, and it's not listed here, is because you have charitable, what they call charitable intent. You want to make a difference in a priority that's important to you. As a father of a child who is challenged with a variety of issues, it's been eye-opening as well to see the huge need that's out there. And these are needs that the free market is not in a position to address. They just aren't. This is a community by and large, whether you're dealing with developmentally delayed children or children who are differently abled, they have a tremendous need. And oftentimes it's only through the work of these really dedicated nonprofits that we can address them. So you've got to have charitable intent. That's the first criteria. Secondly, you can generate significant taxable tax benefits. To make sure that you get the most bang for your buck, Roman and I have both tried to emphasize that we need to coordinate with you and your tax advisor. I have to make it clear, we're not tax advisors. That's not what we do. We may know tax strategies, but we know the language and we know the issues, and we can help you coordinate with your tax advisor who knows the bigger picture. That's what we don't know. Who knows the bigger picture of all of your different moving parts, who can help to determine at what level different types of giving make sense. It's a great way to celebrate major life events, whether it's, an anniversary or a birthday where folks say, hey, would you please consider contributing to this gift? I look at my kids and I think they've gotten everything they could possibly want. Obviously, they'll continue to need support over time because they're still kids, young adults. But at the same time, the idea of giving to them a gift that would benefit others or that reinforces the priorities that are important to them. It's a wonderful way to celebrate a birthday, as I said, an anniversary, or the remembrance of somebody whose life you want to celebrate. It's a powerful way to plan for generational succession. If you've had the privilege of growing significant wealth, and that's our job, is to help you make a lot of money. If you've had that privilege, you may want to say, hey, I do want to bless and benefit my children and my grandchildren, my heirs, but they'll have all the money they need. It's also important to make sure that certain needs are met. And I love, as I mentioned before, when I see children and grandchildren sitting on these boards, because they become aware of needs that otherwise they would not be aware of. They wouldn't have any way to access that need, but these needs are then brought to them. It's a wonderful way to preserve your legacy and your memory. Again, we mentioned a bunch of foundations earlier at the beginning. These foundations were the names of individuals. And once you see the foundation, typically people will do a little research, go, I need to know more about the Pew Foundation. I need to know about, the Ford Foundation. And you get to learn more about that person who otherwise is long past. But above all, it helps your charitable causes for years to come. I'm a big foundation in particular, a big fan of foundations in particular, because I think it's helpful to make distributions to charities on a recurring basis. The needs never stop. I know some people like to give huge sums all at once. Um, Generally, I don't recommend it. Um, there's just the needs never stop. So it helps a charity to be a good steward of their funds while it helps you to be a good steward of your funds. So a charity is a great way to address those needs. Now, one thing before we kind of wrap up, you're going to take a look and go, what kind of charity should I consider? There are a lot of great resources out there. So one of the resources you may consider when you're saying, should I look at this charity, is a website called Charity Navigator. Go to Charity Navigator, type in the name of the charity. It will tell you how responsible they are, what kind of steward they are, how good are they at meeting the particular objectives that you're looking for. Another website is Candid. Candid used to be known as a different name. It escapes me at the moment. And then the Council on Foundations is a great website to kind of assess particular foundations. But charitable giving, in addition to doing all of that, happens to be a legacy that has rich and deep roots in the city of Pittsburgh. I mean, if you think back to how Pittsburgh was founded, the Carnegies, or if you're from New York, Carnegie, um, the Fricks and other folks, they've made a tremendous, the libraries, the museums, the concert halls, the ways that they've enriched people's lives, are just tremendous. Pittsburgh has a tremendous history, an impressive background, and we were kind of at the forefront. We were essentially the Silicon Valley of the late 1800s. So you've got, as I said before, some wonderful services here. A few that I've had the privilege of working with or being part of. The Pittsburgh Foundation, as I mentioned before multiple times, does a wonderful job for charitably inclined individuals to help change the city and provide resources to organizations that you care about. I've had the privilege of working with Wesley Family Services. Again, having a child, especially when they have special needs, there are just so many challenges most folks are not aware of. And Wesley does an incredible job providing services and support to those families. And we're really uniquely blessed to have an organization like Wesley here in Western Pennsylvania. There are other areas that are big as or bigger than we are in the city of Pittsburgh, but they don't have the same resources. Wesley's provided an invaluable support. I also happen to work with the Light of Life, which works with people who are really on life's margins, and sometimes they're about to fall off the margins. These are people who have dealt with tremendous amounts of trauma, addiction, issues that are frankly hard to just wrap your mind around. But Light of Life does miraculous things in terms of bringing these people in, giving them hope, working through their trauma, helping them to start off on a life that actually is productive, that they can be proud of. And I have seen absolute miracles at the Light of Life. The last one I want to mention is Junior Achievement. A lot of folks, these are organizations that provide very different needs. Junior Achievement is just a wonderful way to provide kids with the vision, the inspiration, the skills, and the path to cultivate success. It's amazing to see these really accomplished children who are these emerging entrepreneurial talents who are going to drive the economy in the future. And it's not just the economy. As I mentioned before, I'm a CEPA, Certified Exit Planning Advisor. I work with business owners. And a lot of times these business owners, they are natural investors. They invest themselves in everything. I see that in these children, and I love it. They invest themselves in creating new products, solutions, services that are going to benefit so many people. And they then become the pillars of their community. So think about your community, the softball team, the church, the synagogue. Somebody has a need. Where do they go? They go to the local small business. And those are the ones who are providing. They're not only building the business and serving the community in terms of their product or service, they're also doing it through constant charitable giving. And they transform people around them. So to give these children a vision of what is possible, and oftentimes in a way that the school districts are working, but they're challenged. Junior Achievement provides an invaluable support to these school districts and gives frankly, lessons and insight that they wouldn't get anywhere else. You may be aware of Mark Cuban. He happens to be a fellow who graduated from Mount Lebanon, high school that I went to, or at least graduated from. He went through Junior Achievement. Look what he's accomplished. It's really impressive. These are just 4 different organizations in your backyard that can make a tremendous difference. They're transforming lives. They're transforming futures. There are so many more, and they really need your help. So I want to thank you for your time today. I hope we've been able to address the vast majority of your issues and questions. We have tried as much as possible to do so in advance. Obviously, these are complex issues. We invite you to give us a call. You can see my number, that's my direct line. On this page, you're going to see Romans here in a second. But the idea is we invite you, give us a call. We're delighted to help you not only make the most of your money, but also to meet the needs and the priorities that are of concern to you. And if we can help to support the community at large, we love to. It's a passion for us.
Yeah, I want to thank you all again for your time as well. I have my contact information here as well. Chris and I are just delighted to not only share our afternoon with you, but would be delighted to help you achieve your financial goals. Thank you for sharing not only time, but this afternoon and covering a topic that is near and dear to our hearts and hopefully yours as well. We are here as a resource. At any time, give us a call or an email. And additionally, have an upcoming webinar, January 9th, from our esteemed colleagues, Bryson Roof and David Plant. They'll be talking about retirement resolutions made easy. It's an exciting topic. It's something we talk about quite a bit, and they are both experts in avoiding common estate planning mistakes, avoiding frequent budgeting pitfalls, as well as retirement issues that folks don't always foresee. And that'll be a beneficial webinar. We're excited about it. We'll be in attendance, and hope you can join us there as well.
And I would also point out, keep an eye on these upcoming webinars. We do webinars, as Roman mentioned, on a wide array of life issues. I know Bryson did this wonderful things about dogs. We're not just here to support just your financial concerns, although that's our focus and our dedication. And we want to help you make, as I said before, the most money we possibly can that fits your specific goals and needs. It's always tailored and designed to help you achieve your goals and then to maximize the end result of that. And we look at the entire financial picture so that we make sure any potential issues are uncovered, addressed proactively. And our goal is to provide solutions for you. Even if you're not aware that there's an issue, it's to provide you with solutions. But we also learn to take, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we care about our clients. We come to know them as friends, as people that are near and dear to our hearts. So when you go through those life's challenges and difficulties, we want to know about it. We take it very much to heart. And it's one of the reasons why we provide webinars that address all of life's different issues. We've had them on orchids, on dogs, a wide array of things. Our goal is to help you enrich your life. So it's a pleasure. It's been a privilege. I thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you all. Without further ado, our legal disclaimers here as well. Thank you for your time. We hope to talk to you soon.